She'd lost everything: her husband, her home, her hope. A foreign widow in a foreign land. She faced a choice: go back to the familiar comforts of her past, or cling to the one person she had left her grieving, bitter mother. This is the story of how one radical act of loyalty in the face of total despair set off a chain of divinely orchestrated events that no one could have seen coming. It is a story that starts in the dust of tragedy but ends in the halls of royalty. It's the story of a woman named Ruth, a name that would change history, because when she chose loyalty, God chose her. Our story doesn't begin with a victory, but with desperation. It kicks off during the chaotic era of the judges in Israel, a time when, as the Bible puts it, everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And in the town of Bethlehem, which ironically means house of bread, there was no bread. A severe famine had its grip on the land of Judah, squeezing the life and hope out of its people. Facing starvation, a man named Elimelech made a tough, maybe even questionable, call. He took his wife Naomi and their 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, and left the promised land. They became refugees, heading east to the neighboring country of Moab. This wasn't a simple move. Moab was a land of foreign gods and often an enemy of Israel. For a Hebrew family to leave the land of their covenant for a land of pagan worship was a sign of just how bad things were. They were leaving the house of bread because it was empty, and they were betting on finding a meal among strangers. They settled in Moab, hoping for a temporary stay, but it stretched into a decade of silent exile. For a while, it seemed the risk might pay off. They survived, but survival had a price. The first blow came when Elimelech, the father of the family, died. Naomi was now a widow, a vulnerable spot for any woman back then, but especially for a foreigner without her family to protect her. Time went on. Her sons Mahlon and Chilion grew up and married Moabite women. One was named Orpah and the other, Ruth. This tied the family even deeper into this foreign land. For 10 years, this fragile, blended family, a Hebrew mother-in-law and her 2 Moabite daughters-in-law, existed in a state of quiet tension. We can only imagine the cultural hurdles and the private prayers of a mother hoping to one day get back to her homeland and her God. She was no longer just a visitor. She was the head of a family that was half Hebrew, half Moabite, a living symbol of their displacement. And then, the unthinkable happened. The Bible tells us with brutal simplicity that Mahlon and Chilion also died. We don't get any details. No cause, no long illness. Just the stark, cold fact of death. One day Naomi was a widow with 2 sons to carry on the family name. And the next, she was a childless widow, left alone with her 2 childless daughters. This was more than a tragedy. For Naomi, it was a crisis of faith. In her mind, this was the hand of God himself. She was completely undone. The life she had tried to build in Moab crumbled to dust. No husband, no sons, no grandchildren, no inheritance. She had come to Moab to escape starvation, only to be met by death in a different form. The family line of Elimelech was about to be snuffed out forever. A deep bitterness took root in Naomi's heart. She felt personally targeted by God. She was empty, and she was convinced God himself had emptied her. She was left with nothing but 2 living reminders of her loss: her foreign daughters, Orpah and Ruth, who were now widows just like her. In this darkness, a piece of news reached her from home. The famine in Judah was over. The Bible says, the Lord had visited his people and given them food. This news, which should have brought joy, felt like salt in the wound for Naomi. God was blessing his people in Bethlehem while she, in Moab, had lost everything. The news sparked a decision. She would go home, but this wasn't a journey of hope. It was a retreat. She wasn't returning as a success story. She was crawling back in defeat. So the 3 widows started their journey. Picture the scene: a quiet, sad procession of 3 women, walking the dusty road from Moab to Judah, every step a reminder of what they'd lost. Naomi, swallowed by her grief, was convinced her life was over and that God's hand was against her. As they walked, the weight of it all settled on Naomi. She stopped, looking at her 2 young daughters-in-law. Her heart broke for them. What kind of future could she possibly offer? She was an old woman with nothing. In an act of love born from her own despair, she turned to Orpah and Ruth. "Go, return each of you to a mother's house," she told them. "May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me." She was setting them free. She laid out the harsh reality. She had no more sons to give them. There was no hope, no security with her. Their best shot at a new life at getting married again, at having a family who was back in Moab, with their own people and their own gods. The 3 women wept together. It was a moment of shared sorrow and impossible choices. Orpah, tears streaming down her face, kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. It was the logical, understandable thing to do. She chose to go back to the life she knew, to a future Naomi couldn't provide. She chose the sensible path. Orpah's sensible choice is what makes what happens next so radical. So the 3 widows started their journey. Picture the scene: a quiet, sad procession of 3 women, walking the dusty road from Moab to Judah, every step a reminder of what they'd lost. Naomi, swallowed by her grief, was convinced her life was over. The Bible says, the Lord had visited his people and given them food. This news, which should have brought joy, felt like salt in the wound for Naomi. God was blessing his people in Bethlehem while she, in Moab, had lost everything. The news sparked a decision. She was a retreat. She wasn't returning as a success story. It was a journey of hope. The stage was now set for one of the most powerful declarations of loyalty ever recorded. With Orpah gone, Naomi turned to Ruth, expecting her to leave too. "See," she said, "your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. You should go, too." But Ruth didn't budge. Instead of turning back, she held on tighter. The Bible says she clung to her. That word for clung is the exact same Hebrew word used in Genesis to describe how a husband and wife should hold fast to each other and become one. It signals an unbreakable, covenant-level loyalty. And then Ruth spoke the words that would change everything, a vow that still echoes today as the ultimate picture of devotion. "Don't ask me to leave you or to turn back," she began, her voice filled with a conviction that defied all logic. "For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge." This was a complete merging of her life with Naomi's. She was giving up her own future, her own comfort, her own home, to share in whatever was next for her mother-in-law, whether it was a warm bed or the cold, hard ground. Then came the most radical part. "Your people shall be my people, and your God my God." This was way more than a personal promise. It was a total spiritual and cultural conversion. Ruth the Moabitess was turning her back on her heritage, her nation, and the gods she grew up with. She was choosing the people of Israel, who would probably see her as an outsider, and she was choosing Yahweh, the God of Israel, as her own. This was an act of faith as big as Abraham's, leaving her country to follow a new call. She sealed the vow with an oath that left no room for doubt. "Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried." This wasn't a temporary commitment. It was for life. Finally, she called on the name of her new God to make it official. "May the Lord do so to me and more also if anything but death parts me from you." She was calling a curse on herself if she ever broke this promise, using God's covenant name, Yahweh, to show that her conversion wasn't a future idea but a present reality. When Naomi heard this, she went silent. She saw that Ruth was dead serious, and she stopped arguing. In that moment, a bond was forged not of blood, but of a loyalty so fierce it would become the engine of their rescue. And so, the two women, one old and bitter, the other young and determined, finished their journey to Bethlehem. Their arrival caused a stir in the small town. After a decade, Naomi was barely recognizable. The townswomen started buzzing. "Is this really Naomi?" Naomi's response was a public announcement of her pain. "Don't call me Naomi," she said. "Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me." Naomi means pleasant. Mara means bitter. She was renaming herself after her suffering. "I went away full," she declared to the town, "and the Lord has brought me back empty." This scene is critical. It shows us just how low they were. They arrived at rock bottom with nothing. And yet, the author slips in a seemingly small detail that is actually a huge seed of hope. They got to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest, in a story that started with famine. Their arrival lines up perfectly with a time of abundance, the first quiet hint that God's unseen hand was already at work. Days turned into weeks, and their situation was still dire. They were two widows with no income. But Ruth wasn't going to just sit around and wait for things to get worse. She was a woman of action. She came to Naomi with a humble, practical plan. "Let me go to the fields," she said, "and glean grain behind anyone who will show me favor." Her plan was to go gleaning according to the law of Moses. Landowners were supposed to leave the edges of their fields unharvested and not pick up any grain they dropped. This was meant for the poor, the foreigner, the orphan, and the widow. It was a kind of social safety net built right into Israelite society. But it was also hard, humbling work. It meant long hours under a hot sun, bending over to gather leftover stalks, often for very little grain. And for Ruth, a Moabite woman, it was even riskier. She would be an outsider, vulnerable to whatever the men working in the fields might say or do. But her loyalty to Naomi pushed her to take that risk, to humble herself so they could survive. Naomi agreed, and Ruth went out. The Bible then tells us something remarkable in its quiet simplicity. "And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. She happened to... It sounds like a random lucky break. But in the language of the Bible, this is a clear sign of God's providence. The author is giving us a wink, letting us know that while it looks like luck to the characters, God is secretly guiding every step. Of all the fields in all of Bethlehem, Ruth's feet, guided by an unseen hand, led her to the one place where hope was waiting. She had no idea that this random field belonged to a relative who held the key to their entire future. Soon, the owner of the field shows up. His name is Boaz. The scripture introduces him as a Gibber, Chahil, a mighty man of valor, or a man of great wealth and good character. This wasn't just about his money, it was about his integrity and honor. And you see his character immediately. The first thing he does is greet his workers. "The Lord be with you." They call back, "The Lord bless you." This simple exchange speaks volumes. It shows a workplace with mutual respect and shared faith. Boaz isn't some distant boss. He's a godly man who treats his people with kindness. This is the man whose field Ruth has happened to wander into. Boaz's sharp eye immediately notices Ruth working hard among the gleaners. He asks his foreman, "Whose young woman is this?" The foreman explains that she is the Moabite woman who came back with Naomi, and points out her incredible work ethic. She has been at it non-stop since morning. Boaz doesn't hesitate. He doesn't send a servant, he goes to Ruth directly. And his words aren't suspicious. They're incredibly kind and protective. "Listen, my daughter," he begins, using a term of gentle affection. "Don't go to any other field. Stay here with my young women. I've already told the young men not to bother you." He's offering her a shield of protection. For a foreign widow who was incredibly vulnerable, this was a huge act of grace. He then goes even further, offering her water that his own workers had drawn, a simple but powerful gesture of hospitality in the heat. Ruth is completely floored by this kindness. She falls on her face, bowing to the ground. "Why have I found such favor in your eyes, that you would take notice of me?" she asks. "Since I am a foreigner." She knows her status. She's an outsider, a Moabite. She expected nothing. Boaz's answer gets to the heart of the matter. He tells her that her reputation has preceded her. "I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since your husband died," he says. "How you left your father and mother in your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before." Her radical act of loyalty, her covenant faithfulness, was already the talk of the town. And then he speaks a blessing over her that turns out to be a prophecy. "The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Under whose wings? It's a powerful metaphor for shelter, security, and God's protection. Ruth had put her trust in the God of Israel, and Boaz was blessing her for seeking refuge under his wings. He had no idea that before the story was over, Ruth would ask him to be the human hands that provided that divine covering. That evening, Ruth went back to Naomi with an astonishing amount of grain and an entire ephah of barley, enough food for weeks. Naomi was stunned. This was way more than any gleaner could hope for in a day. "Where did you glean today?" she asked, a spark of excitement in her voice. "Blessed be the man who took notice of you." When Ruth told her the man's name was Boaz, a switch flipped in Naomi's mind. That name was a key, unlocking a door she thought was sealed forever. For the first time since she got back, the cloud of bitterness started to part. Hope, real and strategic, began to dawn. "May he be blessed by the Lord," Naomi exclaimed, "whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." It was then that Naomi revealed just how important this was. "The man is a close relative of ours," she explained to Ruth. "He is one of our redeemers." Here we get introduced to the vital idea of the gold, the kinsman redeemer. This was a critical part of Israel's society, a rule designed to protect families from crisis. A kinsman redeemer was a male relative who had the right and the responsibility to redeem or rescue family members from hardship. This could mean buying back family land that had been sold out of poverty. It could also mean marrying the childless widow of a relative to raise up a child who would carry on the dead man's name and inheritance. This was the social safety net of ancient Israel, making sure a family's legacy didn't get wiped out by tragedy. And in the name Boaz, Naomi didn't just see a kind man. She saw a potential gold, a possible answer to her prayers, and a way to restore her husband's family line. The wheels in her mind started turning. Ruth kept gleaning in Boaz's fields through the whole harvest, always under his protection. When the season finally ended, Naomi decided it was time to make a move. She came up with a plan that was both brilliant and incredibly risky. "My daughter," she said to Ruth, "shouldn't I find a home for you, where you will be well provided for?" She was now on a mission to secure Ruth's future. She told Ruth to wash up, put on perfume, and wear her best clothes. Then, she was to go to the threshing floor, where Boaz would be working that night. The threshing floor was a public spot by day, but at night, it became a much more private, vulnerable place. Naomi's instructions were shockingly specific. Ruth was to wait until Boaz had finished eating and drinking and had laid down to sleep. Then, she was to quietly go to him, uncover his feet, and lie down. This was a bold move that put Ruth in a precarious spot, relying completely on Boaz's good character. Ruth, in another act of beautiful, loyal obedience, simply replied, "All that you say I will do." She followed the plan perfectly. She went to the threshing floor and waited. After Boaz ate and was in good spirits, he lay down at the end of a pile of grain to sleep. The air was thick with tension. In the middle of the night, Ruth crept forward. She gently lifted the cloak from his feet and lay down. This gesture of uncovering his feet was an act of profound humility and a plea for help. He was symbolically placing herself at his mercy and under his authority. At midnight, Boaz woke up with a start. He felt something at his feet and sat up, trying to see in the dark. "Who are you?" he asked. Her answer was the climax of her entire journey of faith. "I am Ruth, your servant," she said. And then she made a move, echoing the very blessing he had spoken over her weeks before. "Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." The Hebrew word for wings can also mean the corner of a garment or a cloak. She was taking his prayer that she find refuge under the wings of God and asking him, right then and there, to be the human answer to that prayer. It was a direct, culturally understood marriage proposal. She was asking him to be a kinsman redeemer, to cover her with his protection, take her as his wife, and to rescue their family's future. This was the moment of truth. A lesser man could have taken advantage of her or shamed her. But Boaz was a man of noble character. His response was pure grace. "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter," he said immediately, calming any fear she had. He didn't just approve, he praised her. "This kindness is greater than that which you showed first," he said, "because you have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor." He knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't chasing a crush or a rich husband. She was acting out of loyal love for her husband's family, trying to preserve his family line. Boaz was deeply moved by her selflessness. He agreed to her request. "I will do for you all that you ask," he promised. But he pointed out one problem. There was another kinsman redeemer who was a closer relative. By law, that man had the first shot. But Boaz promised to handle it, publicly and properly, the next morning. If the other man refused, Boaz swore an oath. "As the Lord lives, I will redeem you." He then protected her honor, telling her to stay until just before dawn so no one would see her leaving. Before she left, he filled her cloak with 6 measures of barley, a generous gift that was also a signal to Naomi that he had accepted and would get the job done. True to his word, Boaz went to the city gate first thing in the morning. The gate was the center of all legal and business life back then, like a courthouse and city hall in one. He sat down and waited for the other kinsman redeemer to walk by. Boaz gathered 10 elders of the city as official witnesses to make sure everything was legal and above board. He first presented the case to the other man in purely financial terms. Naomi was selling the land that belonged to their relative Elimelech. Did he want to buy it back? The man quickly said yes, it was a good investment. But then Boaz dropped the other shoe. "The day you buy the field from Naomi," he declared, "you also have to acquire Ruth the Moabitess, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property." This changed everything. Buying the land was one thing, but marrying a foreign widow and raising a son who would not be his heir but the heir of her first husband was a huge complication. That son would inherit the land, which could mess up his own children's inheritance. "I can't do it," the man said, "or I'll endanger my own estate." He formally gave up his right of redemption to Boaz. The path was now clear. In front of all the elders and the people, Boaz sealed the deal. As was the custom, the other man took off his sandal and gave it to Boaz to make the transaction official. Then Boaz made his triumphant public announcement. "You are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, and all that belonged to Chilion and to Mahlon. Also Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, I have acquired to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. You are witnesses this day." The people and the elders erupted in blessings, praying that God would make Ruth like Rachel and Leah, the great mothers who built the nation of Israel. The deal was done. The redemption was complete. So Boaz took Ruth as his wife, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The story comes full circle. The women of Bethlehem, who had once greeted a bitter and empty Naomi, now gathered around her to celebrate this new life. Their words to her are a perfect reversal of her own complaint. "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer." They cried out. They looked at the baby, born to Ruth, and said to Naomi, "He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." Naomi, the woman who had returned calling herself bitter, the woman who claimed God had brought her back empty, now took the child, laid him on her lap, and became his nurse. Her emptiness was filled, her bitterness was turned to joy. The loyalty of one foreign woman had redeemed her life from the pit of despair. But the story doesn't end there. The final verses pull back the curtain to reveal the true, stunning scope of what God did through this small, personal story. The women named the baby Obed, and the narrator tells us his legacy. Obed became the father of a man named Jesse, and Jesse became the father of David. Let that sink in for a moment. Ruth the Moabitess, the foreigner, the poor widow from an enemy nation, through one radical act of loyalty, was grafted by God into the direct family line of Israel's greatest king. The story wasn't just about her and Naomi, it was a crucial link in God's great plan of redemption for the whole world. And the line doesn't even stop there. Generations later, from the line of King David, another child would be born in that very same town of Bethlehem. A final kinsman redeemer, Jesus Christ, who would offer his life to redeem not just one family, but all of us. The story of Ruth shows us that our small choices of faithfulness, our acts of loyalty when it's hard, are never small to God. He is the master weaver, who takes the tangled threads of our pain, our loss, and our humble devotion, and weaves them into a majestic tapestry of redemption that is far greater and more beautiful than we could ever imagine. If this story of loyalty and redemption hit home for you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear that their faithfulness in a hard season matters. Do you and T forget to subscribe for more stories of how God works through ordinary people to do extraordinary things. We'd love to read your thoughts on this beautiful story, so please leave a comment below. Thanks for watching.